no one could love me. Words of promise, words of hope. Will you pray with me? May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be blessed by you, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Parables are meant to tell us about the realm of God. Often Jesus' parables begin, in fact, with those words. The kingdom of God is like, and then he goes on to tell us a story that, while discomforting, is also reassuring, generally. Not so much this time. This parable feels pretty uncomfortable. I think we generally try to figure out who is representing whom, and particularly where is God in the picture. Surely God is not the owner of the fig tree, giving the order to chop. That kind of hellfire and brimstone language for God has never been my experience of the Holy One. You may have heard me say, perhaps even more than once, if I could use only one word to describe God, that one word would be love. So what on earth is this parable about? How can we understand it as a story about the ways of God? I've preached on this text many times over the course of my ministry. This text becomes good news for me when I realize that God is not the owner of the fig tree. God is the gardener. God is the one who sees the promise, the potential, the new life just waiting to burst forth when it looks like such a thing is never going to happen. God never stops loving, never stops seeing with eyes of love, and therefore never loses hope. Yes, God is the gardener. So who are we? When considering the parables, we need to ask that question. Who am I? Who are we? As we think about the question, we need, I think, to consider the whole passage together. Margaret separated it into segments, but we need to think of the whole thing as one. Remember those first 5 verses which seemed foreign to the bit about the fig tree? The verses telling about Pilate's brutality towards the Galileans. It sounds like a bloodbath of Galileans who had come to worship and offer sacrifice in the temple. And those other deaths apparently resulting from shoddy construction of a tower. These verses, made way too real for us in our present world situation and events in the news, can help us to make sense of this whole puzzling tale and bring its meaning home to us here and now. Perhaps the people of the land are the owners of the fig tree. That's us. Everyday people, with and without power and influence, the rulers, the skilled laborers, every person who breathes in air and walks the paths of the land. You and me. We are the ones represented by the owner. In Jesus' day, the owner was probably an absentee landowner. And what we are called to is a new way of living together in creation. Brennan had the words for us. Remember the creation story? We are called to be stewards, to care for this garden of creation that is ours to share. Or here's another possibility. We are the fig tree, God's project, in whom God never gives up. Did you ever watch Mr. Rogers with your children? Not Bruce, but maybe as a child, when they were young. Remember how Mr. Rogers came through the door from the neighborhood? He stopped to greet us. He went to the closet to change into his sweater, sat down to put on his slippers, put his shoes and jacket away in the closet, all the time welcoming us and telling us patiently what we're going to do for the day. Everything he did and said was so gentle. You could feel his love. Mr. Rogers seemed to embody the wisdom of the ages. He oozed loving patience. Mr. Rogers would have been a great owner and tender of a fig tree, seems to me. He always said, "I love you just the way you are." He saw the promised potential waiting to be revealed in us, the watchers, in the children. I was telling my daughter on the phone this week that I was planning to mention Mr. Rogers, and she said that she found a website somewhere that had the story of Mr. Rogers. Maybe you've seen it. I think, Gloria, you have. And she couldn't remember, or I don't remember who she said. Someone, some world person, some leader, person in responsible position who was going to have to speak to children, if I understood the concept, always went to Mr. Rogers to ask, how do we talk about this? How do we wrap our brains around this in a way that is helpful and doesn't just add to the destruction? Well, fig trees. Fig trees require Mr. Rogers' kind of patience, I think. A fig tree takes up space in the garden for 7 years before it produces edible fruit. Sure, you can sit in its shade before that time. You can hone your gardening skills, exercise your muscles digging and pruning. You can enjoy your fig tree's beauty and celebrate its potential. Collect fig recipes. Cultivate a taste for figs. The fig tree can be enjoyed right from the beginning. And the fig tree needs you to be doing these things along the way to help it grow to its full potential. But you must allow the fig tree to take its own time to grow and mature as you tend and nurture it along the way. Or you will never enjoy the fruit it was made to bear. And I'm thinking, as we think about ourselves as a fig tree, maybe we need to have patience with ourselves. Maybe we have to not lose hope in our own potential. Maybe we need to be confident to an extent and gentle with ourselves. So back to those first few verses. Nothing I ever read or heard about Pilate will lead me to think of him as patient. Pilate was a brutal man who abused the power of his position. There are actually no extra biblical records anywhere from his time of the particular incident that's recorded in this passage. But his abuse of power is known and recorded. To attempt to stand up to his corrupt use of power was to become a victim of it. Fear was the tool that Pilate used to control the people under him. We might say he spread crap across the land, but it was not seasoned like the manure Jesus mentions digging into the roots of the fig tree. It was fresh and acidic and smelled bad. It brought pain and death, not new growth and life. Pilate, I think it is fair to say, had no altruistic goal in his way of ruling. Pilate was in it for himself alone. It's harder to know about the builders of the Tower of Siloam, which fell on those 18 people who were killed when it fell. Were they unskilled and poorly taught in their trade, so the temple fell? Or the tower fell? Did they put the tower up too quickly? Did they use shoddy plans? Were the materials, the building materials they used, faulty? Did they build on unstable ground? The Middle Eastern culture of Jesus' day was based on honor and shame. That is the meaning of the question, were the ones who suffered worse sinners? The culture would have pointed to the people who died claiming their shame somehow meant that they got what they deserved. But Jesus took that story and turned it upside down. Don't blame the victims. Look to the system. Where does the system need reform? Where are the strong and healthy roots and shoots that will bring new life and produce fruit? Dig around the base of the plant. See what is going on. Add manure that has been well seasoned so it will help and not burn out the roots. This is the work of faithful living. As individuals, as families, as congregations, as nations. This work of patient nurturing, giving guidance and encouragement, and time for the turning of the seasons. So we said, what if we are the fig tree? We need to look at that possibility. What if we are God's project, in whom God never gives up? We are the fig tree called to produce fruit for the world. Then our challenge is to be willing to have the soil around our roots loosened and moved round so we do not become root-bound. And our branches may need pruning to allow for new growth and healthy fruit. Perhaps we need food for growth, new ideas, new food, new ideas, new possibilities bursting to be soaked into our roots like fertilizer, giving new energy and life. Perhaps we're called to provide shelter and space, a place for quiet meditation, a new vision. In other words, in short, perhaps we need to be willing to change, to be changed. The good news is that God is with us in this garden and never stops loving us. And we have what we need because we are beloved of God. Life shared in this garden matters. What we do makes a difference. The challenge is that we have choice. God is the gardener who practices active patience and calls us to do the same, allowing time for growth and maturation while actively working to encourage and support the well-being and health of these precious fig trees. I'm not a fan of giving titles to sermons, and when Richard asked me for a title for my sermon some weeks ago, at that point I was thinking, patience. God, give me patience now. And that's what I told him. If you look in your bulletin, you'll see that it got shifted a bit. God, what does it say?
Grow my patience.
God, grow my patience. I need it now. And in this past week, after the bulletin had been printed, I realized what I really want to say is, God, grow my active patience. I need it now. On Friday, I sat with this sermon, still listening for the nudging of the Spirit as I read what I had written in preparation for this morning. I was reminded of the prayer of St. Francis of Assisi. You know the prayer, make me a channel of your peace. The sung prayer, make me a channel of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me bring love. Where there's injury, your healing power. Where there's despair in life, let me bring hope. I sang this as a solo at Knox many years ago. If I remember correctly, somebody played the guitar and I sang it, and it was pretty new to us at that time. I would love to sing it now. It says all that I long to say, but you may have noticed I have no singing voice this morning. None. Zero. Zip. So instead of singing, I speak. Maybe as we walk along this life with all its changing challenges, active patience means patience with our changing abilities and recognizing that when one gift is not available to us or useful in the moment, there are other ways that we can make a difference if we are willing to be involved, to be changed, and to act. God is not causing the calamity. Indeed, in the midst of the crap, God is inviting us to do what we can, to use the gifts we have in this moment to be involved, with the possibility that what we do will make a difference. So active patience. This is the patience I hear Jesus advocating, inviting us into. I hear his voice clearly. Don't stop. Don't give up. Don't be afraid. Don't get caught up in thinking it's all up to you and you have no hope of changing things. I'm with you. Do what you can for each other and with each other. You are my precious people. I love you.